Hello everyone, we have Aryan with us today. So Aryan has been one of the best mentors at the platform. He has done his MIM from Imperial College London. He has helped people get into multiple programs at HEC, ESSEC, FSFM, Imperial, NUS, and so he comes with an experience of a lot of degrees, not just MIM and not just his own experience, but also experience of looking at profiles and helping them. He has been doing it for like 2 years now. So I felt that we should ask him a few questions because he has been on both the side of things, how it is when you are preparing, how it is when you are preparing other people, right? So I want to ask a few questions so that when people look at this video, they get clarity on whether this is the right option for them, what you would suggest other people, because I'm sure you must have been getting a lot of requests on LinkedIn, right? But it's not a possible thing to go there, write very long replies for people, right? So I'm just going to be asking those questions, which we usually get when we talk to the students first, right? And hopefully they get clarity via this. Just to introduce myself, I am Kevin. I am the founder of Alconnect, which is basically a mentor-based platform that helps other people get into top schools abroad, especially Indians. So we prioritize top 15, top 20 schools of the world for MIM, MBA, different kind of MSCs, right? So Aryan, do you want to say something?
So first of all, Kevin, it's been a lovely introduction. It's pretty humbling. So thank you for that. Eager to answer your questions that you have and break some myths in the way.
I think we can start with the first question, Aryan. Everybody, talks about rankings and, like how important QS, FT rankings are, right? I want to understand from your perspective, like when you went to Imperial, right? What was your experience? How different was it? Was it just another number on, let's say, the QS list?
Okay, I'll give you a perspective on this because I've been at Imperial and I've looked at a guy who was at LSE. He was my roommate, right?
Right.
So that brings out that comparison in the way. Imperial is ranked number 2 in the world by QS at the moment. And LSE, for example, is around that 50th mark. In terms of curriculum, there's no difference. You have 18 hours of classes in the first semester.
Yeah.
In the next semester, it gets reduced to 10 hours. And the third semester, it's more often than not the internship semester. Correct. So with regards to the curriculum, there's no difference in the top 50 schools. Once you go beyond that, I don't know because I've not experienced them. But first 50, you're kind of fine because all of them fall into the tier 1 category. In terms of how a tier 1 would be different from a tier 2 or a tier 3,
Right.
basically the frequency of career fairs that you get, right? You might have a career fair at Imperial, LSE, LBS, Oxford and Cambridge every month. Around 50 companies coming on campus. Right. So in 12 months, you might have 600 companies if that's the frequency. At a school which is a tier 2 school or a tier 3 school, there might be less career fairs. So the frequency might be pretty less compared to what it would be at an Imperial, at an LSE or at a HEC Paris or at an NCR.
Right. And another question which we usually get, when people compare Paris, London, Frankfurt, Munich, the expensive places like, let's say, New York, right? So they want to understand if, let's say, cost is actually worth it, right? So from your perspective, you think the living expenses, the way the program is structured, right? How expensive it is, I think it's keeping in mind how rupee is in comparison to, pounds right now. I think it's going to be costing anywhere around 50 lakhs now, right? So would you say, maybe in your own parameters, it was worth it?
I'll answer the question directly after the explanation, right? So what I try to do is, first of all, break down the cost into rent, food and groceries, to travel, as well as the tuition fee. Rent is as expensive as you would find in New York, excluding Manhattan. Right? Living in a Canada Water, a Canary Wall, a London Bridge, all of those areas which are posh areas. So rent is as expensive as it would be in New York. With food and groceries, surprisingly, I found it to be less expensive than what you would find groceries to be in a tier 1 city in India. Like, honestly speaking, like some vegetables were so cheap that I could say, am I actually in London? Was my take. With regards to tube, you would find it pretty surprising because London has the most expensive tube in the world. Right? It's more expensive than New York. That's like the cost of living, set away.
Right.
The thing is the tuition fees. I need to understand when you are paying a premium, which is a conversion of rupee into a pound or a euro or a USD, you're always paying a premium, right? So what you need to do is figure out the premium that you would like to pay, and you would figure that out via the universities that you are trying to get into and the exit options that you come across.
Right.
So if you're paying premium of living in London, only doing it from a top university, I think it's worth it because the exit options open up regardless.
Right.
If you are paying premium of living in London, but you are doing it from, say, Queensmary, I don't want to mention case, but yeah, if you're doing it from a Queensmary, you're paying the premium of living in London, but you are not kind of doing it from the top university, so your exit option will get reduced even if you come back to India. So that is to go evaluated.
Right.
In my case, it was pretty hell-bent upon getting into one of the top universities in the world because the ROI gets to you 3 years to 5 years down the lane, right? It's not just about getting a graduate visa in London. It's also, in the UK. It's also about probably opting for a optional training practice program or a visa in Netherlands, in Germany, and other countries, which give you an option if you have graduated from a top university. Correct? So you have to evaluate all those parameters and come to a decision. In my case, it was worth it, I would say, because I'm kind of getting that ROI from a contractor role that I'm already doing. So that kind of, because I'm kind of earning in USD. So yeah, it was driven by the fact that I had a profile, I had Imperial in my background.
I think that makes sense, right? So like one question, maybe in just yes or no, you can reply back. You want to go too deep into it. Would you say there is a huge difference between a school like, let's say, LBS, LSE, Imperial, and some other school like, let's say, in no comparison, but maybe Warwick, or Cass, King's College London, specifically for, MIM course, couple other, because I know Warwick is great for bachelors, right? So specifically for MIM, do you think there is a difference in ROI?
If you're applying to jobs in the UK, they don't care about where you get your degree from. They do care about is your citizenship, your PR, your visa, right?
Right.
But as a hedging option, I would say, if you want to come back to India, and your exit options increase if you have Imperial, LSE, LBS, INSEAD, HEC Paris on your CV compared to a Warwick or King's College London.
If someone is, planning to apply to Imperial next year, right? Maybe it's for MIM, maybe MSc Finance, maybe MSc Marketing. Any major MSCs these schools are known for. And they're watching it today, right? And maybe they want to apply next year, right? What do you think they should do from now on that helps them get into such schools?
I think there is a career essay specifically for Imperial, and they have a huge emphasis on that. You have to figure out your 3 roles that you want to get into, 3 companies that you want to get into, and these skill sets that you would need to get into those companies. If you figure these out and justify it in 100 words of how you would get this role, what are the skill sets required for this role, I think you should be fine.
Okay, so career clarity is the first most important thing.
A lot about your employment.
Yeah, makes sense, right? So, I mean, they want to get that sort of confidence from you if you'll be able to get your dream job or not, right?
Exactly.
I think that's something that almost all schools like, because career.
Imperial specifically because I had applied to Chicago Booth and Kellogg School of Management as well, being very honest. There were not dedicated career essays in that. But for the Imperial specifically, you had a dedicated essay. And I have not seen, I've consulted a lot of clients for ESSEC, HEC, all of those schools. But the kind of comprehensiveness you need in filling out the Imperial career essay questions,
right,
it's not there. That at least in my experience, I haven't seen that.
And just for everyone to know, right, this is a very candid interview, right? These are some questions that I had shared with Aryan before, but he told me that he want to be very candid with, the content, and he want to improvise the content while we are, discussing, right? So hopefully we'll not be making any cuts to this except the silences. Next question would be, how is the job market right now? Not specifically in London only, right? Like whatever places you know about, right? Be it Paris, be it US, etc., etc. How is it? Maybe India also, if you have some knowledge about it.
Okay, so you need to understand, if I'm looking at a geography such as the UK, currently the Labour Party is in place, right? And job market is directly proportional to the sentiment of the government as well. So they are against immigration at this point of time, even if it's legal immigration. So even if you are, say, for example, an ex-BAME in India, which is the case with a lot of my friends who went to Imperial, They work for a couple of years or 1 year in Bain, and then they apply to the same roles as a business analyst or an associate consultant in London itself. They could be met a first shortlist as well. So you need to understand it's not about your own profile, it's also about the volume, right? So you have to apply to a lot of companies. That should be the main criteria to find a job. You shouldn't be tied to one particular company, one particular sector, or one particular profile. You have to be open to a lot of them, because volume would give you the numbers and not exactly a specific targeted strategy, because you have to diversify, considering the government has a sentiment of anti-immigration at this point of time. So job market is pretty, I would say, dependent on luck plus hard work, 50% luck, 50% hard work.
Is there a place in Europe that you would recommend, like not like school, business school wise, but helpful for Indians to find job as long as they are skilled enough?
I think at this point of time, that Germany as a country is probably the one country which would allow Indians to pivot into roles which are very specific in nature, right? Technical in nature, because obviously they have this visa program which is still going on. Apart from that, I think Netherlands is also pretty open. Obviously, the acceptance rate might be 2%, but compared to a 0.5% in the UK, that's like a 4 times increase. So even 2% would be much better than a 0.5% in the UK. So Netherlands and Germany are two countries. You can also look at Luxembourg, but I'm not too sure about Luxembourg at this point of time, because I'm still reading about requirements of it, because obviously it's always good to explore opportunities elsewhere as well.
You're right. And just for someone who's like exploring these places, right, I think the top schools would be WHU, Mannheim, FSFM, ESMT, TUM for Germany.
For specifically Germany, I see like FSFM to be at the heart of everything, because it's in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
City which is a pretty metropolitan city. You have all the finance companies, all the consulting firms there. I've been to Frankfurt, so I know that. And FSFM is literally in the heart of the city. So you have these networking opportunities with you. With regards to, say, WHU, it's outside the city, right? It's a village. So it gets very difficult to find networking opportunities.
Makes sense, right? Plus, FSFM isn't as competitive as, let's say ESSEC or Imperial or LBS, right? It's a very realistic school, plus, budget-wise also, it's not that expensive. I think it's like 36-37 lakhs, right? So I think that's a good suggestion. Only one thing, if somebody's considering an MIM in Europe, in Germany, would be like these schools, which is WHU, Mannheim. They want a business degree in your bachelor, so engineers cannot apply. For TUM, you need to be an engineer or a non-business background person, just for someone who's looking into it. In Netherlands, we have, Rotterdam School of Management, right, which is part of the Erasmus University. Then you have University of Amsterdam, these two schools that I know of. The schools are, I'm still, not so confident on the ROI, haven't researched more on that, right? But people have reported good things about these two schools. And I think in Luxembourg, there is only University of Luxembourg that I know of, right?
I think Luxembourg, it's more of like, if you get a degree from Europe and you want to work in Luxembourg, it can be an option. It can be a good option, right? It's not like you want to do a university from there and then obviously pivot into the job market. In my opinion, I would say like go to Germany, go to Nibel.
Yeah.
Try to find a job there. If you can't, then obviously Luxembourg is a geography that you can target.
Makes sense. So a lot of people, give a lot of emphasis on GMAT because they say that, they say that I want to start working on my applications after I'm at GMAT, right? After I get my score. Because what if I don't get a good GMAT score, right? What do you think about that? What is the importance that these schools give to GMAT? Some words on that.
I think my answer to this 5 years ago would be different.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're not targeting a finance program or an MBA program from a top business school abroad,
yeah,
it's okay to get a GMAT waiver and prove your mathematical as well as your verbal abilities through other means. Verbal abilities can be proven by a TOEFL, IELTS, or a Duolingo test. Duolingo is accepted in Imperial as well by the Duolingo test. And your quantitative abilities through your mathematical background, if you have one, right? Because see, again, once you get into a top business school, career services would get that GMAT score out of your CV as soon as possible. And nobody's going to ask that GMAT score, even if you are applying for jobs.
Right.
This is the case if you come back to India. Nobody is going to ask your GMAT score. It's more about your overall profile, whether you did your schooling from a top business school or not. right? That's the case. It's not about the GMAT at all. GMAT earlier used to be about 30% of your profile. Now it's reduced to around 15 to 20% profile if you're doing a finance or a MBA program. Otherwise, if you're doing a marketing program, it's kind of...
It's, I mean, 90% of our admits, last year, be it HEC, ESSEC, you work with someone who got into ESSEC without GMAT, right? Right. And secondly, like for HEC, we had someone with a 595 GMAT. She got into HEC MSc marketing program, right? So these are, programs where it's optional, that's there. But what about a program where it's compulsory? Like you cannot get a waiver for MIM at HEC for GMAT, right? Same would be for LBS MIM, right? Let's say someone is not getting a waiver, right? What do you think is the ratio of importance that these schools give to GMAT versus the profile or career plan?
See, if it's a mandatory thing, then you obviously have to get a 595, which is, I think, equivalent to 650 on the old GMAT edition.
Yeah, that's the...
should be the benchmark.
Basic.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're struggling a lot with it, either don't apply to these schools or try to mail the admissions committee of how you can prove your abilities through other things rather than giving the GMAT exam. If they give you a waiver, great. If they don't, you don't have an option, right? You have to tick that box anyways. So try to, if there are 9 buckets to get into a business school, 8 of them you're fulfilling. The 9th one is the GMAT score. Try to get that borderline GMAT score, and I think you would be able to get it.
Right. So like you mentioned, right? So maybe with a very strong profile, someone who has a brand name in their undergrad or someone, whose experience is very unique. Maybe for them, like even 605, 615 is enough, right? But if profile is very generic, right? They might have to go for a 645, 655 and just a little higher GMAT score. But some people think that if I don't have a score of 735, 745, right? They are doomed. First of all, people don't understand the difference between focus edition and classic GMAT score now, right? That's one problem. But like you mentioned, I would also want to stress on the same point that GMAT is it's very important to show your academic rigor, right? If maybe your GPA is extremely low, right? Maybe something is extremely off in your profile, it will help you. But career clarity, like you mentioned, I think that almost gives like a 3x confidence, to these schools regarding whether you'll be able to find a job or not, right? I think that'll be more important. Coming down to the next question, let's say someone with a very weak profile, reaches out to you. So what would be the first thing that you would recommend them to do and make them change in their profile for these schools?
First of all, it's important to understand that business school application is less about your brand that you have been attached to previously and more about your current presentation to the bill, right? If you can explain your gaps in your CV, if you explain why you got a low GPA and how getting a formal education in a particular sector can fulfill that gap for you in your workplace, which is related to career,
right?
It makes sense, but you have to present it well. That is the most important thing in my opinion. So even if you have a weak profile, if you have a low GPA, if you can explain it via extracurricular courses such as from Coursera, right? Your mathematical modeling, financial modeling, all of that stuff, right? And if you have an internship in marketing and you want to get into finance, right? You have to list down those courses that you have done or a research paper with somebody, a professor abroad, I don't know, right? You can explain those gaps through other means. And if you can present your case well, that's the most important thing, right? Take it till you make it. But you have to be in a position wherein you're explaining everything clearly to the admissions committee and being very clear about your short-term and your long-term goals.
Have you seen applicants with, very average profiles? Like when we look at their raw resumes, have you seen such profiles get into better schools than people with on paper better profiles than them? Maybe from your experience at Imperial or other schools that you've helped students get into?
I'll try to answer this question by an example. Suppose there's a candidate who did his undergraduation from St. Stephen's, worked for Bain & Company in private equity, right? And is now going for a MIM program or targeting a MIM program, right? MIM program is a general management program. Obviously, you get to specialize, but private equity, I haven't seen a lot of courses in private equity there. You're trying to justify that you want to get into Imperial because you want to work into private equity again, and Imperial would help you out with it. The admissions committee might not be able to see a gap in your profile.
Yeah.
Versus a guy who is into marketing, right? and wants to get into private equity, has done a few vocational courses in private equity, and obviously is trying to get into program, not MIN, but specifically a master's in finance, for example, right? So you can justify that gap. Okay, fine. In finance, you'll cover these modules, whether it's venture capital, it's private equity, whether it's financial modeling, all of that stuff, right? So private equity is a part of it. And now you're targeting a MSc finance program. You have already done some vocational courses, but your experience is in marketing. So this thing that you want to get to somewhere, or you want to get to a particular place, but you have a gap in between. That is where justifying that gap becomes easier. For a guy who is targeting a general management program, who's already done work in private equity at a top firm, who did his undergraduation in finance, right? There's no gap as such. How do you justify that? So I personally feel, even if you have a very strong profile, if you don't justify your gap, why you want to get into an Imperial MSc Finance versus an Imperial MIA, right?
Right.
Doesn't make sense to the admissions committee to roll out and admit for you.
I think in good profiles, that's the only weakness that you can find is the need to do that degree. They are not able to, find that need in a lot of cases, right? Right? So if there is no need, then you are better than the school, right? So why should the school take you in? Last question, right? Based on your experience of helping people, at Alconnect, what do you think is like the biggest myths that people have there in their mind when they're applying to schools that then you help them, clarify and you give them a direction for?
I think, considering I usually work with candidates wanting to get into top 50 business schools abroad.
Yeah.
It's very daunting for them to believe that they can get there, right? And you need to understand from a perspective of an admissions committee, right? If you have a stellar background, if you have no gas to fulfill it, it's very difficult for the admissions committee to roll out an admits for you, because they don't feel that there's any need for you to do that particular course. One candidate who has a gap in degree, who wants to get to somewhere and is trying to justify it well in their application.
Right.
It's where it's important to understand for students specifically that having a gap is a good thing if you can justify it well, right? So that is where a lot of students have a hitch of, okay, fine, I have a gap in my CV. I don't know how to do this, right? Am I good enough to be there, right? Essay, to be at HEC, to be at NCR. So that is where they need to understand that it's important to have a gap, which you can justify well, because that would give the admissions committee, or they would take notice that, okay, fine, you have a gap. Now, this is how the school can fulfill that gap for you and help you in your future endeavors.
Makes sense. I think, Aryan, that's it from my side. I think your answers were on point. This is the right duration of the video that I wanted, right? So it helps us retain the viewers while answering all the questions they have in their mind, right? So now towards the audience, so if anybody is planning to work with Aryan, you want him to mentor you on your applications for maybe MIM, maybe MSc marketing. I'd say, he's helped a lot of people for MIM, MSc marketing, right? But he's as good as, a finance mentor as well, apart from these degrees. He comes with experience. So by chance you want to work with him for the round 1, round 2 of the upcoming applications, so there's a link in the description. You can always reach out to us if you align with his values of how he helps people, what he believes in. And that's it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. We'll be happy to review those. Maybe if there are some repetitive questions, we may come up with a second part of the same video and Aryan can help us answer those questions. Well then, thanks a lot, Aryan, for giving your time. Hopefully, we get few very strong aspirational students to work with you soon.